Okay, we are live with Robin. Robin, how do I pronounce your last name? I don't want to mess it up.
Taub.
Oh, I was going to say Tab. Or
Taub. A lot
Taub.
of people do. No.
Say it again for me.
Taub.
Taub? What's the background of that last name?
Like
Taub.
Eastern European.
Eastern European.
Probably.
Like Romanian?
Polish Russian.
Polish Russian.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
And so I was just complimenting Robin, everyone listening, on how calm she is here, because usually before we start this, people are nervous. You're totally not nervous, so it'll be my job to try to make you nervous.
Okay.
Put you on the hot seat.
I feel like I'm on the Joe Rogan show with these headphones on and this whole setup. It's great. I'm
really?
excited.
Oh, we're happy for you to be here. So Robin, you got your book that we're going to dive into, The Wisest Investment, Teaching Your Kids to Be Responsible, Independent, and Money Smart for Life. The reason that this means something to me, and we were talking about this briefly before we started recording, I love my parents. Okay.
Good.
My parents are, very, I'm, they're ultimately, I owe them everything, because without them, I'm not here. But when the topic of money came up in our household, I'm just thinking if our mom listens to this, if the topic of money came up, it just really wasn't discussed very much. Investing or saving wasn't discussed. Our father ran a business for a while, and I'm chuckling, but it was a horrible situation in the early 90s in the recession there, that it was just stress. So the topic of money, sometimes he would grab at his heart, thinking is he going to be okay? And Nick and I, my brother and I, had to figure out a lot of our own money lessons, our own way. It wasn't in high school. It wasn't anywhere. And it was through different books and mentors. So when I saw that you had, I didn't even know how we crossed paths, but when you wrote this book and I saw the topic of this book, I just knew we had to chat. So you got to tell me, how did you get to the point of writing this book? And it must come from a place of frustration. So I want to hear it.
Actually, that's an interesting hypothesis, but it didn't come from a place of frustration. So I'm an accountant by training. So I have a financial background. I worked in accounting firms. I worked on the trading floor at Citibank Canada and derivatives. And so I've always felt really comfortable and confident with money and financial concepts. And we didn't talk about money a lot growing up in my house, but it wasn't off limits. It wasn't taboo. I don't remember having those feelings about it. I mean, sure, my parents each had certain, weird habits with money, but it wasn't something that we couldn't talk about. And then again, having pursued it professionally, that was always something that I just felt I was always very interested in it, like economics, business, finance. So when my kids were growing up, it was just something that we talked about. My husband's also an accountant by training. We actually met at work. So in our house, it was a topic of conversation. And my husband runs his own business. So again, business was a topic of conversation. And it was something that I felt strongly that my kids should have a good grounding in. I wanted to raise kids, like the book says, that are responsible, independent, and money smart for life. So at a young age, I just started talking to my kids about money, building these teachable moments into our day-to-day lives, these little money lessons as they would crop up. And it really did pay off, because my kids are now in their 20s. And my daughter followed in my footsteps, in a sense, and she went into accounting. But my son didn't. He studied philosophy, and he's a musician, and he still has a very good understanding of money and finance. So that's what got me interested in it. But the book itself actually came about because originally CPA Canada, they published the first version of this book. It had a different title. And they actually had done research, and they wanted to help parents who they knew were struggling. They did a study that found that 78% of parents had tried to teach their kids about money. More than 2/3 didn't feel they'd been very successful, and half didn't know what information they needed. So with that, they decided they wanted to write a book or have a book written that they would publish. It was their first consumer publication. They had only written guides for accountants before, and they hired me to do it. So that's kind of how the book came into being. And then that book came out 10 years ago or more now, 11, and I recently updated it to reflect the fact that we're living in this digital world now where cash is disappearing. And we were hit by this pandemic, which had so many consequences. So that's why it's now called The Wisest Investment. And it really is
You're
my
such
philosophy.
a nice person. You didn't come from a place of frustration like so much of my life has come from. You came from a place of this needs to be done and I can contribute. So
Yes.
you were like being of service, which is fantastic. So
Exactly.
And I want to dive into this a little bit, but 10 years ago. So you wrote this 10 years ago and
Yes.
you've kind of stuck with it because now you said you've updated it.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be nice through this 10 years if this book was threaded through our education system, almost as like, I don't know the latest. You allude to it in your book that there's, some different education going on.
Yes.
But I feel like something like this would be really great mandatory reading, like really towards the end, somewhere in grade school, then again in high school, like just a quick seminar or something.
Right.
I just feel like in high school, I feel like there was the opportunity to really make an impression on money and how the system works.
Mm-hmm.
And the business course I took in high school in grade 12, or this was back in grade 13 days, it was kind of helpful, but I really feel like if I reflect back on those years, I got nothing.
I got
like
less
zero.
than you. And I went through grade 13, that extra year. No, I mean, we had a law class, which I didn't take. We had an accounting course at my high school. We did have an economics course, which I took and loved. And that kind of got me set on my path towards, doing a commerce degree at University of Toronto and then becoming an accountant. But like you said, financial literacy, which for your listeners, viewers, is the knowledge, skills, and confidence to make responsible financial decisions at every life stage. That wasn't taught. I didn't come out with any knowledge or skills or confidence in that area. And I kind of taught it to myself as I went through school and then life. And again, I did have the confidence because I had studied this stuff. But most people don't. And now, though, there is financial, like for example, in Ontario, financial literacy has been integrated into the curriculum since 2011. So when this book actually came out, from grades 4 to 12. And it's even gone further in recent years. So now the grade 10 careers course in Ontario has a module on financial literacy. And they're teaching age-appropriate things like how to plan for the cost of university or life after high school. And the grade 9 math course was updated in September of 2021 to also teach some of these financial skills, like what's a mortgage and, how does that all work? So, and it's being done across the country in every province and territory in different ways, mandatory courses, electives, investment clubs, all these things. So it is happening now more in school.
Wow, I'm such a skeptic. You're so positive on this. I'm glad that it's happening. I'm
well,
still
how
a skeptic.
well it's been done by these,
I want you to go to all the schools. Here's the plan, okay? Get all the high schools in Ontario. Start with Ontario. Go through all the high schools and give like a 2-hour talk and then hand out the book at the end. I think that would be very impactful.
I would love that if my book was a textbook or required reading, even though it's for parents. Certainly, like high school kids can read this book. And I have been involved in curriculum programs that, for example, Royal Bank created a program that they were delivering in the high schools in different modules on saving, spending, and investing.
Okay,
and
cool.
over the there's lots of grassroots efforts to create resources to help teachers teach this. But again, it always comes down to like how comfortable is the teacher with this material, and are the kids paying attention? What are they taking away from this? But really, most people feel that parents and guardians have the most responsibility for teaching this.
Sure, and of course that makes sense. When you I'm just thinking, you're reminding me of my own journey because I went to university and I think CIBC had like a student visa booth. And of course, I got one, and then I went on to make minimum payments on my student visa. I don't even know what the rate was. I assume it was 18% or higher. And I was making minimum payments probably for 3 or 4 years.
Until someone told you.
Yeah, I forget. And then I paid off the debt, and it was my student loans that I got that I used to go to Acapulco. Because I took the money, but then I used the money for something different.
Right, not the intended.
No, and I even funded a buddy of mine his trip to Acapulco. And after like 2 years after graduating, I'm still paying everything back, right? And I remember going to him saying, "Hey, listen, can you pay me back for that trip already? I'm trying to pay off these freaking student loans, man." I think it was my OSAP. I assume they still have OSAP,
yeah, they
but
do.
It was OSAP loans. Yeah. So yeah, my journey into finance was just going straight into debt.
Credit card debt.
Yeah, credit card debt.
Immediately. And I hear that story a lot because they are on campus, these credit card companies.
Yeah, so what do you tell people on that specific, and I want to get into different parts of your book, but just since that came up, what do you say to people about getting their first credit card or that kind of debt?
Well, I try to get parents to teach their kids about what a credit card is, even way before they're old enough to use one. So most kids get them, if they're lucky, if it's a a card on the families, it's like a supplementary card, they should still understand if they're charging things, what this means, how it's different from a debit card. Money's not coming out of your account. It's buy now, pay later, right? You're borrowing money. So I try to get parents to explain how it works, that it all adds up to one amount that's due on a specific due date. If you only make the minimum payment, you're not really chipping away at it, and it grows and interest is charged. And you can even see on the statement how long it's going to take to pay off if only the minimum payment is made.
Oh my gosh, I forgot
right?
that.
That is a great
I think
thing
mine was so long that I just stopped looking at that. I forgot about that.
Because it's years. Years. So that's step one. And then when they're old enough to get their own card, which is the age of majority, so 18 or 19, then it should be their responsibility. So it's their card, set the limit low so they can't get into too much trouble, like maybe 500 or 1,000. Get a card with no fees. And make sure they understand that they have to check it, take a look at it on your phone or go onto your computer, make sure the transactions look legitimate, see when the due date is, plan ahead, make sure you have the money to pay it off. Because if you use it responsibly, it is a great way to build a credit history and a credit score. But if you don't, it's a very fast way to get into trouble, and then you have to dig yourself out.
And then it's a disaster. We actually have my son has, I think it's a $500 limit. He had to go with one of the, I think, higher interest rate cards because he had no credit history, and I wanted him to qualify for it because it's his thing. His
card.
But secretly, I'm always panicking that he might not be making the full payment on it.
No.
But I don't want to be that parent to remind him. So I want him to handle it, but then I'm panicked at the same time. I think maybe this is a generational thing. My parents didn't teach me anything. Now I'm trying to overcompensate.
Yeah.
But
my son would torture me. He would jokingly be like, "Wait, I can't remember if I paid off my credit card bill. Did I? Wait, it might be late. Is that bad?" He would just say these things because he knew it would drive me crazy.
In your book, what I really liked is when you talk about your values and how your values influence your financial decisions. Can you talk about that a little bit and why you put that in the book?
I'd love to. So I have 3 strategies for parents because I know parents might be hearing this going, "Oh my God, this sounds really important. I don't want my kids to make the same mistakes I made, but where am I going to find the time or the knowledge to teach my kids about money?" Well, I have these 3 strategies. One of them is to use your values. And your values are the things that are most important to you, that you're willing to take a stand for. So for some families, it might be education, it might be adventure, security, health, relationships. And your values can act as almost like an invisible framework to help guide and prioritize financial decisions and to set meaningful goals. So in the book, as you saw, I have an exercise called the Values Validator that helps you tease out what your top 5 values are. And then again, keep those values top of mind when you're making financial decisions, and talk about your values with your kids because actions speak louder than words. So our kids are watching and listening and learning from us in the way we behave around money, and the way, how we spend our money tells our kids a lot about our values. So just keeping all that in mind and then using those to help them set goals.
Yeah, I love it. And at the end of the chapter early on, I love the resources that you have in here because I find a lot of books I used to read on money, because I think in my 20s, when I realized I was useless with this and I had to figure it all out, I read a ton, but I didn't see resources like you have, like the role model self-assessment, where you kind of give yourself a grade on how you are about money.
Yes.
And then creating a budget. You have a really nice, simple way to create a budget. And then you have assets and liabilities, which is amazing. This is chapter 1, but laid out so easily and clearly, so it's easy to fill out. But then my favorite, the Values Validator, at the end of this chapter, and number 20, you called it wealth. I really resonated with the description of that value, which is I want to be able to afford opportunities. What I've learned in my life is that I like autonomy. I don't
That's
want
what you call that.
Yeah, I
like that too.
Yes, I don't want anyone to tell me what to do. Just leave me alone.
That's part of your life, your terms,
sure.
right?
Yes, for sure. So I realized that to be able to be like that, and not in some mean way, I wanted to march to my own drumbeat kind of thing. I would have to figure out money in the financial system and my own kind of how to build a net worth and how to have cash flow and freedom. But I've only come to realize that about myself maybe in my 30s or something. If I had seen this and how your values can really kind of tie back to some of your early financial decisions and decisions on how you make money. If I saw this when I was at the end of high school, and if I discovered back then that autonomy was really important to me, I could have made some career choices that really would have lined up with my values. So out of all the things that you've shared here, the net worth statement stuff, I just think, wow, at the end of high school, wouldn't it be great if everyone just looked at all their values? Because you have so much listed here, like self-development, security, routine, prestige, power, location, independence, adventure, advancement, activity. Like if you just went through that, it's such a unique, different way to look at money that I think would have impacted me at an early age. Whereas maybe the cash flow statement would have felt like homework.
I know.
Whereas this is so important. This is amazing that you put this in here. So I love it.
Oh, thanks. I also came to learning about values and how important that is in decisions late too. I did a professional coaching training program called CTI, and that's where I first encountered it and did a values exercise and had the same kind of aha, like, oh my God, if I had only known about this, it would have saved a lot of pain. Yeah, like dissonance, because when things are not aligned with your values, you just feel uncomfortable. Things don't feel good.
No, I remember getting my first job. Sorry, I want you to finish that. Just remember, you're giving me flashbacks to my first job, like graduating university. I got this job as a programmer at the Royal Bank, with the Royal Bank on Front Street downtown. And I lived in Mississauga, still at my parents' house. I went to the GO train, and then I got on the GO train, and then I went downtown. And I remember just the GO train fees were high. And then after tax, my income wasn't as high as I thought it was going to be. And then I had to be on this train every day at a specific time. So just the finances weren't rewarding. And then the schedule of me being in this, I felt like I was being controlled.
Yeah,
and the dissonance I felt at that moment was like, I'm going to swear, so I apologize. We're just getting to know each other. I'm like,
go for it.
Fuck this shit. I go, this is shit. This is all wrong.
Totally,
and I started having so it was Carol, we were, my girlfriend, then fiance, now we're married. But I had nightmares. We'd be over at our house watching a movie. If I fell asleep, I would wake up with sweats. And it was that dissonance that you're talking about. I just felt I'd done all these things, high school, university, got good marks, did what I thought was right. And then came into the real world going, this is my life. And I think that's why your values exercise resonates with me so deeply.
So first of all, your listeners can get that for free if they visit robintaub.com. So that values validator will pop up and they can do it and figure out for themselves what is so important to them, what they're willing to take a stand for. So in my case, when I started my career in accounting, the hours were insane, especially during tax season. And you had to do everything in the office. There was no such thing as remote work. And I've always loved working out and exercise. And I couldn't do that in the way that I wanted to. And that drove me crazy. So now I know that health and fitness is a very high value for me. And having the ability to work out and make that part of my day to day, that needs to be there in my life or I don't feel good. So at the time, I didn't know that. And
drives you crazy. Yeah. It's funny. Something so simple. Looking back now, I feel like, oh, well, Robin, didn't you know that about yourself? It's so obvious for people who know you, but you don't know it about yourself. It's frustrating
at that age. And so, I think for our kids to do the values validator, even you'll be surprised that they have a sense of what's really important to them. Some kids, they already know they want to travel or they want to move out or they want to get a car. They want, they want something that's tied back to a value. So I think it's an eye opener.
So talk to me about allowance. And I love the way you broke out the book, by the way, because you broke it out into different age groups of your kids, age ranges as kids are growing. And you kind of have the same themes through all the ranges, but you talk about things a little bit differently depending on their age, which I loved.
Exactly.
Allowance. I get a lot of questions on allowance. What
do? That's interesting.
Yeah. What can you tell us?
I feel like it's one of the top questions I get because, and I think the issue comes down to some parents, they want to know, do I tie it to chores? Or do I just give my kids an allowance so that they have the opportunity to manage money and make choices with it?
Or grades, which you cover in
grade. That's another thing. Some people want to tie the allowance to grades. So first of all, I like to think of, you mentioned this, the way the book's laid out, these 5 pillars of money. So earn, save, spend, share, and invest. So the 5 pillars never change, but the specific topics and examples do as your kids get older. So the thing about allowance is that it does allow your kid to make these choices. If they have some money coming in, then they can decide how much to save, how much to spend, how much to share, how much to invest for the long term. The issue with tying it to chores is that some families feel those chores should be done out of a sense of family responsibility. And I agree with that. Others also want their kids to understand what it takes to earn money And that makes sense too. So you have to do what feels right for you. Again, what's in line with your values and your means. And maybe there is a happy medium where you can give your kids a basic allowance that allows them to make, because you want them to make mistakes when the stakes are low, right? Before they get a credit card at university, you want them to buy things that they regret or lose money or just whatever it is. And then if they have a basic allowance, they can make those choices with, and then they can have other opportunities to earn money. So extra things they do around the house that you would maybe have to pay someone to do, or once they're old enough even to do an odd job like, dog walking or babysitting, classic babysitting, then they can earn money. And then, of course, once they're teenagers, they can get a real job. So I think just you want them exposed to money and the choices and the fact that there's consequences, because money's a finite resource.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're making me think I didn't really feel like I had those consequences for whatever reason. I went way too long. Just any money that came into my life, I just spent it all.
Well,
like
that's
I just
the
didn't
thing.
Save any of it. Like I remember going to the bar.
That wasn't a choice. That registered with you.
Yeah, like I remember working construction, and I was a subcontractor, so they didn't take any tax off. And then I thought I was like rich with all, but you got paid actually really well. Mm-hmm. So then I had all this money, way more money at that time than my friends. So then we'd go to the bars. So now I'm like 19 or 20, and I was just buying drinks for everyone. I was just like, hey, everyone here, you know what? I got it. Drinks are on me. Let's have some fun.
I'm flush with cash.
And then I got the tax. I remember my accountant then saying, well, hey, Tom, like, here's the tax you owe. And I literally remember driving away from his house. He was doing his personal tax. I think he worked downtown, but he was doing personal taxes out of his house or whatever it was. And I remember driving away from his house in Mississauga, almost having a heart attack. Thinking like, I don't know what I would have owed, maybe $2,000 or $3,000. Like it wasn't that much, but at the time, that might as well have been $80 million. And I thought I was going to have a heart attack.
But again, how would you have known if someone hadn't explained to you how income tax works? And that's also in the book, because kids will expect their first paycheck to be the gross. But as we know, if you're an employee, it's the net, and it's not just tax. There's things like Canada Pension Plan and employment insurance. So if no one explains it to you, or you don't take the time to teach yourself, it's not your fault. Like, how would you know that?
Mm-hmm. It's just devastating.
It is.
But you're right. Yeah, I'm with you.
And then you have a tax bill to pay, which
oh my gosh.
They're not going to
oh my gosh.
forgive that.
Yeah. I've shared this before. So you're just giving me so many flashbacks of our family, because we had CRA froze my father's bank account for a while. This is the early 90s, deep recession, drywall company really struggling. And I guess my dad, I still to this day don't know all the details of that, but I remember going to the teller it was a TD Bank in Mississauga, close to where we lived, and I was trying to get money out. So for a little while, our parents were divorced. During that time, I took care of some of the bills and stuff. Mm-hmm. So, I had an allotment to take from my father's bank account. I was contributing to these things at that time as well. Mm-hmm. And then when I went to his bank account, which I guess I had authority on, I can't even remember, but they basically just told me, I don't know why they said it was
frozen.
Yeah. They said there's a note on your account. Your account's frozen by CRA. And maybe my memory's foggy, like maybe they didn't say CRA, but it was in the end. Yeah. And I remember just going home that day and then talking to my father. I'm like, I can't really get any money for those bills we need to pay. Anyway, you just go through it. This is shocking you, Robin. No, this was normal upbringing.
No, but that's what happens in a family business sometimes that struggles. You use the cash flow to pay the bills that are crushing down on you. And you figure, I'll deal with the source deductions or the remittances or whatever it was.
Yeah. And I am thankful for that period, because we got through it. It was bad, but we definitely got through it. And I think it taught me a lot about money, because part of my education was I never want to be in that situation.
The negative role model.
It was
right?
It was that. It really was. So then, what then do you talk about in your book about bank accounts? Because you bring it up, like, how do you introduce it? When's the right time? What do you say?
Yeah. I mean, so in this digital world, it's like, who's even using cash anymore? And I notice you have like a Bitcoin on your desk. Yeah. So that's the thing. Bitcoin dominates the headlines, and everyone's thinking digital, money's digital. So I still advise parents with young kids to start with cash, because it's concrete and tangible, and it's not conceptual. So with young kids, like let's say, 4-year-old, 5-year-old, get them a piggy bank. And there's some great multi-slotted piggy banks that have 4 slots for those choices that I mentioned of save, spend, donate, and invest. But once they outgrow a piggy bank, it's time to open an account at the bank, because, you you get a debit card, which is so important now because we are doing a lot of tapping to pay and just digital transactions. And it teaches your kids about the concept of interest that, in theory, when your money's with the bank, they pay you interest. If you have to borrow money.
I like how you slipped in theory.
Well, especially youth accounts have very low.
Yeah.
Even in, when interest rates are higher, they always have very low accounts because they have low fees or no fees. But just introducing that concept of interest, it's kind of a milestone once they open their own bank account. And then, as I said, they can transact, they can watch it online or on their phone and see how much money they have. And, if they've been spending it, buying things or taking cash out, they can have some kind of control over their spending and what's going on there.
And what you're saying is such a good point. I found with our kids doing we didn't use a multi-slot piggy bank. That would have been nicer. We just had like little Tupperwares. But just separating it like you described seems so powerful, and having it tangible. Like here's your allowance, and then if you're, have your buckets, however you want to have them, the way you've laid them out. For my son, I remember vividly one time he wanted a new bike, so we made another one, which would have been like his savings or invest, but it was like his spending, so we made another one called bike.
Yeah, for
sure. So then he can like put all the money in the different buckets, and then he had like, I'm like, oh, you don't have that much left over for your bike here, so maybe the money that you would have in your spending bucket, you got to make some choices now.
Well, that's just it. You just said it, choices. And that's, again, when you have a goal, that teaches kids to delay gratification and wait for reward. So that's a really important thing to teach. Like, it's a muscle that you want to exercise and work, and a habit that you want your kids to have, so that they're not just, wasting their money on things that aren't that important to them because of instant gratification. Instead, they know what they want. It's tied to a value. It's a bike. And, you have a plan for how you're going to save up for that. And often parents will offer to match. Like, if your kid is saving for something big like a bike, maybe you can encourage them to reallocate by matching whatever they can, whatever they come up with.
For sure. I'm just thinking, my son's now 20, and he just changed out the car that he was driving, and he's been saving for a long time for that. And we helped participate a bit in that. That was kind of our agreement if he hit a certain level. And I'm just thinking another thing that he had to learn in the last few years was about just inflation, and that the price you're saving for something, how that changes. And looking back on my own teachings, I probably would have introduced some more earlier inflation talk, just this kind of concept of how prices can change a little bit.
Yeah, that's a really
well, just because used cars right now, so much, they're appreciating assets now, Rob. You're an accountant. I think cars, you should consider appreciating assets.
Yeah,
now. Okay.
Instead of taking depreciation, we should mark to market them. Okay.
Yeah. I have a couple more questions from your book, but I want to rewind before I forget. What the heck were you doing with derivatives at Citibank? Oh, yeah. What were you doing there?
That was a great job.
What was that all about?
So I was working in an accounting, I worked at accounting firms, and then I left to work a client of one firm that was in real estate syndication, actually. And it was just, I lasted for only 2 years, and it was just a bad experience. Like, remember that movie Horrible Bosses? It was that. So a friend of mine was working at Citibank Canada at the time, and he was in this derivatives marketing group, and it sounded really interesting. And I got the job. Like, I had a lot of interviews, and it was totally different kind of job than I'd ever had. I worked on this open trading floor, just like you see in the movies. And I was on the team that serviced financial institutions. So we would work with the traders and the clients sort of in between to sell derivative products that they would use to either hedge their balance sheet or hedge a product that they were offering. Yeah, it was really interesting.
You were right in the nuts and bolts of the financial system there.
Yeah, that was a very interesting
deep in there.
Job.
2 years. But you said it was...
I was there for 5 years.
Oh, sorry, 5 years.
I was there.
Okay.
I was at the other place for the client, and then 5 years at Citibank.
5 years at Citibank. And then you said it was an amazing job, but you also had it was horrible bosses. So you survived.
No, that was the other job.
Oh, sorry. I don't want to confuse them. Sorry, I don't want to confuse them.
Yeah, no. The 2 years that where I was in real estate syndication were the horrible bosses. Citibank was good bosses and good people and really smart people, like literal rocket scientists working on the trading floor.
Wow.
Doing the trading.
Yeah. And then where did you leave? I forget. I remember that reading at the end of your book there. Where did you leave after that?
That's when I went out on my own.
Oh, got it.
After that. My kids were very young when I was working on the trading floor. They were like 3 and 1.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And my father passed away suddenly, and I had a lot of responsibilities to deal with related to that.
Wow.
So I took a short leave of absence to help get his tax returns filed in Canada and in the US, and then I didn't end up I was very optimistic to think a 2-month leave would do it, and I wasn't finished, and there was a lot of work to do, and I ended up not going back to Citibank, but kind of starting in this financial literacy area.
Awesome.
So it was around that time, after the global financial crisis in 2008, where people were starting to pay attention to what financial literacy was and why it was important. In Canada, there was a task force on it. So a lot of stuff came out of that global financial crisis.
Do you ever work with our government on anything? Should get you in there. We need to, no?
I haven't.
No.
Not directly. Like, there's been some task force, and I've
I always feel those task force have such great objectives, but nothing ever gets done.
I mean, it's government. I will say, though, November's Financial Literacy Month in Canada.
Okay.
So obviously you didn't know that.
No. I think every day is Financial Literacy
It should be.
Month in Canada.
It should be. Yeah. But so they do have a lot of things going on at that time that I participate in those things sometimes as a participant. Sometimes my clients are doing things during Financial Literacy Month to try and educate Canadians.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so flip back to your book. What's your take on your first job? And we covered taxes a little bit, but your first job, like what comes to mind when I say that from the book?
Well, my first real job was, I think it was between my second and third year of university. I worked at a place called Office Land.
Oh my gosh, I remember.
Do you? It was on Dufferin near Glencairn.
Oh, Office Land. I think I'm thinking Office Depot.
No,
sorry,
this is like, I think
that was like Business Depot. Office
that's right.
Depot. Office Land.
Office Land. They sold like fax machines, all kinds of used.
You're saying fax machines like it's such a relic. Do you remember the fax machine? Do you remember the roll of paper?
Yes, special.
Super thin paper.
I just saw it in a movie too. Actually, I was watching a movie last week called The Insider. About the tobacco. Yeah. Anyways, they were sending messages back and forth on a fax machine with that roll of thin paper. So yes, I worked there. I was a receptionist, and they sold all kinds of used office equipment, including typewriters and all kinds of stuff like that. So that was a summer job. And then another one I remember was I worked in the economics department at U of T.
Oh, cool.
Between my third and fourth years. Yeah, I had 2 professors were writing a book, and I was just sort of a general researcher, and that was a cool job.
Got it. And then so for your your kids are older now.
Yes.
If someone's thinking with their kids, do you recommend, is there a certain age that you've seen some clients
get jobs?
Yeah. Or is it just family by family? Everyone's different?
Well, I think, yes, that's true. In everything to do with money, I would say family by family, everyone's unique. Some kids go to camp. Some kids work in the family business from the time they're really little. It really depends on, again, values, your financial means. I think a lot of kids start off, as I said earlier, babysitting. Like, it's such a classic.
It is, yeah.
They take the little certification at school, and then they do their thing for a couple years, and then they start then they become teenagers and they want to go out on the weekends and not babysit. That's what happened with my kids. But, there's so many classic, like, teenager jobs, like working in retail or working in a restaurant. And I think right now teens are in a strong position to get summer jobs if they don't already have one. I'm sure such a tight labor market. And so employers are turning to teenagers. And there was a trend where teens weren't working as much because it was hard to find jobs, and they were doing the things they needed to build their resumes to go, for university and college. So, but now that's really shifted, and there's lots of jobs, and I think that, they can negotiate pretty good terms. And
I got to admit, this generation of teenagers, and even early, if they're in their early 20s, I'm impressed with their work ethic and their ability to handle things. I'm totally blown away. So makes me, I feel like it's good times ahead for all of us, because I don't know, this generation coming
they're
out
sophisticated,
here,
they're smart.
The only negative is, I think, because they have such a good environment to get a job, I want them to be yelled at a little bit more, because I grew up on construction sites where you just got, oh gosh, yelled at. Yeah, I was like,
it was probably very tough.
It was horror. Looking back, it was just all the trades yelling at each other. Like, I remember being probably 15 on a job. I don't even know if I should have been. I started 13 on a job site just in the summer. I went to school.
Yeah, of
And
course.
You're looking at me like I worked there first time, all time.
Your dad was in the drywall.
Yeah,
so
yeah,
you're in that
it was
world.
family labor.
Yeah.
Just throw them in. And if you had to get up, this is before cordless anything. So if I had to get a plug, and I would go around the corner and plug something in, and somebody then would freak out saying that was their plug, and they would unplug it, and they would just start yelling at me. And it's like, I'm like 15 years old, some guy 45 years old, big dude, just yelling down the hallway, and often not in English, all different languages, right? Because when I was on the job site, it was like heavy Italian. My father's Croatian, so there was Croatian and Italian and Portuguese. Those are the three that come to mind for me, and just everyone yelling at each other like with different swear words.
You learned a lot of
you
those.
Definitely learned a lot of, yeah. But it was a bit intimidating. But so that's my only regret of this generation. I'm like, I just wish they got yelled at a little bit more.
Yeah, I guess in an office you're not going to get yelled at very much. You need to be like on a construction site.
I hear even construction sites are very pleasant right now.
Really?
Yeah, it's very, very different.
Maybe retail or in a kitchen, you'd still get yelled at.
Yeah. I don't know if this is a positive thing. It's just in my brain.
Yeah.
I just want them to suffer a little.
Kind of a rite of passage.
Yes, totally.
Yeah.
I love how you talk about paying yourself first and kind of like the importance of that. Can you just talk about a little bit about that?
So that's one of my 11 healthy habits of financial management. And I talk about it for parents so that they can be good role models for their kids. But that's such a good habit you were saying, like when you started making money, you didn't think about saving anything. You were just spending, right? So the idea with paying yourself first is that you take some off the top right away and just set it aside in a separate saving or investment account. It's almost like the way your income tax is supposed to be deducted off your paycheck. You just don't think about that money. You know that it's gone to the government already, and you just learn to live on what's left. So that's the same idea. It takes the self-discipline of saving out of the process, because most people, if you wait for the end of the month, there'll be no money left. Like if you pay yourself, you end up paying everyone else first, and then there's nothing left at the end. So it's about prioritizing you and your savings and your goals, and then just living on what's left.
I think, that changed my life. Paying yourself first. That's changed my financial life. But the struggle I had to get over, and I don't know how you address this with people, is that I did have credit card debt when I started doing this. Mm-hmm. And I just made this decision that if I don't start, I have to pay these debts off. But if I don't put something away immediately, I'm just never going to be able to save. And so I actually did it while I still had some debts. What would you say to that? Like, is it?
Yeah.
I know that's a unique answer. It depends on all the different types of debt and interest rates and all that kind of stuff. But I just freaked out, and I just thought, I got to do both. I have to pay off my debt, and I have to start saving, and I got to do it right now. Like I went from not having any financial literacy to maybe picking up quite a bit after reading like a whole bunch of books, and then just freaking out that I was so far behind. Yeah. So I went like 0 to 60 on some of my own decisions. What would you say to someone? Pay off debt or save and pay off the debt? I guess there's no one right answer. I think
there's no one right answer. Again, it has to be what's going to keep you in this habit. So some people will tackle their debt first, and then those debt service payments will revert to being savings as soon as the debt's paid off. So whatever you were using towards paying off your credit cards,
so it's like saving because you're getting the debt.
Yeah, and then instead of taking that money and now spending it or increasing your budget for other things, you'll just put that right into saving. But if it makes you feel motivated and better that you're doing both, and it's going to take a little longer to pay off the debt, that's okay too. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think, the conventional wisdom is tackle the high interest debt first.
Sure. Yeah.
Because it is costing.
The credit card debt
is, 18, 20%, like you said. But some people you want to have those wins that create momentum, that good compounding. So if that means paying off something first and quickly, even if it's lower interest rates, some people prefer that method. It's called like avalanche versus snowball.
Oh, got it. I've never heard of that.
Yeah, there's different.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, it was the habit, I think, that really helped me. And I think I did get rid of my credit card debt. If I remember, it was the student debt. I was like, this is going to take me quite a long time. I'm going to have to start savings because I can't just clear this anytime soon. But the last payment when I walked into CIBC, I was so happy. I think when I gave the payment and the teller at that time, like I think they stamped something. Yeah. I think I was like expecting them to know it was my last payment or something, and like to
congratulate.
Yeah.
Celebrate.
Nothing happened, right? I just walk out and look at this payment. Yeah.
No, but you should celebrate that.
Oh,
yeah. Fantastic.
Oh, it was Rockwood Mall in Mississauga, Burnhamthorpe and Dixie. I'll just never forget. It felt like I felt free.
It's amazing that it's burned into your memory.
It's just totally.
I'm curious, what were some of the financial books that you read in the education of you?
I guess it was really late 90s that one of the ones that stuck out for me was Rich Dad, Poor Dad. So that was like a big one. And I think because it was like a story and it kind of resonated. And I had
narrative format.
Format. I didn't understand assets, liabilities. And then I went on to read, I think his follow-up book was The Cash Flow Quadrant. And then it just talked about, like you do, kind of like, just income and, building up your assets. These are liabilities. I never heard these kind of concepts.
Yeah, see, that's the difference. What I was saying, because I was in, commerce, in first year, I had to take accounting. And that's like the first thing you learn. Debits are on the left, credits are on the right. No, you learn about balance sheet.
I would have been out of university here by I think I went at 96. So it was like 3 years after university that I just started like reading. Like I'm in like my late 20s. Before that, I read a couple books. Do you remember the world's biggest bookstore?
Yes.
Right off Yonge Street?
In Toronto?
Yeah.
For sure I do.
Yeah, I would hang out there all the time. And I would go in there and I'd go into the financial section and I read one book that was like, Your Money or Your Life.
Yes.
It was some older book and it basically said you could work for money forever or you could choose to live.
I think I have that book.
Really?
When I get home.
Okay.
I think so.
I remember reading it thinking, I want to live. I want to live. I don't want to work forever. Yeah, I'm autonomous. And then there was another one. I read The Wealthy Barber.
I was going to ask about that. Yeah. Everyone says that one.
Read The Wealthy Barber. Narrative format again. That's
yes, I think he's the one, Dave Chilton is the one who came up with the narrative format for this kind of book, financial book.
So that one, what were the, I read one book that always stuck with me by an author who wrote a lot of like, I don't know if it's like call you metaphysics or he wrote a book like on some new age stuff, but I think that back then it was called New Age. But anyway, this book was on money and it was called Trick to Money is Having Some by Stuart Wilde.
Never heard of it.
Oh man, it was so good. I remember reading that book and just canceling I had a cell phone. ClearNet was the cell phone company. I don't know. That was an early, and I canceled my cell phone. I'm like, I got all these expenses I got to get out of my life. So
it really had an impact.
Yeah, that one had an impact. I really like, and that's why I kind of resonate with your book because I love at the end where you have the exercises because it makes you think. It's not just like you finish the chapter and you move on. Those are the kinds of things that really make me understand concepts. So the fact that you have those in there, I'm like, oh, this is really good the way you did this. And I'll bring up the values again because to me, I don't resonate. I'm weird in that Nick, my brother, is much more looking for deals and managing dollar and cents. I go a lot on my life on feel, like if something feels right, which is maybe sounds weird. So I've never really thought there was a lack of money going to be in I was never concerned I would have a lack of money. It was more just, I need to organize this thing called money. Like I'm always going to have enough. I will always have more than enough money in my life. I just need to organize the buckets like you describe so that they're in the right places where at this point I've been having money flow into my life. Not a problem. It's flowing right out.
Right.
So I just need to organize it. So a lot of the things that resonated with me then changed from how to pay off debt to, how do I make money in the manner I want to make it? What's this thing, entrepreneurship? And can you have a career and a side hustle? Can that side hustle produce some extra revenue for my life? So I started a couple of websites that did affiliate sales with Amazon way back early in the day. Yeah. Cool. I started in a website called Sales in the City because I thought, there's all these sales and people want to know the sales and I'll sell this newsletter. I did all these kind of side things.
That's so cool.
So I wish I could remember a few more of the early books. But anyway,
that's a good.
But the world's biggest bookstore, like that was really, really important to me. And I just think your book can have that impact on people.
So thank you. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
I hope so. I mean, I really wanted to help parents with this because, as I said, this is something a lot of parents feel they're not good at it themselves, so they don't want to talk about it, or they have a lot of money and they don't want to talk about it, or they're afraid they're going to get uncomfortable questions, or they don't want to share the mistakes they've made. And every mistake is a lesson and a learning opportunity. So you can even share those. Your kids aren't expecting you to be perfect. They know you're not.
Oh, totally. Yeah. I tell them I screwed up all the time. But even the fact that you broke it out into teaching young children, teaching preteens, teaching teenagers, and then teaching emerging adults, and you even get into what bonds are, and the way you break it down, I like because you're like, well, you can just explain it this way. Like you just have a nice way to clearly explain these concepts, where I feel like today, like we just had a team meeting here. We were talking about the bond market right now because it affects mortgage rates and the whole bit. And there's some people on our team asking questions because we're all still learning. Like we're, in our 40s, a bunch of these questions will keep coming from people in their 40s. They had never had these conversations around bonds and what the bond market does and how it dictates some rates on mortgages and that kind of thing.
Yes.
The earlier you know these concepts, I feel like the earlier you can set yourself up properly and then be free of all this stuff. I'm sure you see some adults that could benefit from your book. So what I want to know is, when you see adults, what do you see as a common theme where you're telling your husband or someone like, I can't believe these people are still doing this? Like, what's the common thing Canadians are messing up on?
That's a good question.
Something you must say, like...
Well, I think a lot of parents just don't prioritize this. So it's the not teaching their kids part. But in terms of their own... I think what we talked about before, like not paying themselves first, and you can set that up so easily as an automatic transfer. Like you don't have to even manually do it. You can just have it done at the bank directly. So there's a lot of healthy habits that I go over, and I think the opposite is not doing those things. So, not knowing where you stand, not prioritizing savings, not understanding the difference between needs and wants and explaining those to your kids. Not protecting the downside, like with insurance or an emergency fund.
The emergency fund is so key. I feel like when you have an emergency fund in place, it gives you peace of mind. You're not always freaking out.
You have that liquidity, so you don't have to sell something at the wrong time. You can get through, or you're not in a really terrible situation where you may have to like sell your house or something like that. Yes. So there's... I think the pandemic and COVID was really a big wake-up call around the emergency fund. Had the government not stepped in with all these, things, it would have been terrible if people didn't have an emergency fund. I think also like having updated wills and powers of attorney.
Oh, yeah,
like
so
half
smart.
of Canadians, I think it's the
we actually had someone here talking about the importance of that. He's dealing with people all the time where they pass away, the estate isn't set properly in a will, and it's an absolute disaster because the government then comes in and dictates what's happening to some of these things.
Oh, exactly. Well, that's what happens when you die without a will. You die intestate, and there's rules at the province, and it's different in every province as to what happens to your assets, and it's not necessarily what you would have wanted. And it's amazing how many high-profile people die without a will. Like I think Aretha Franklin died without a will.
No
Prince,
way.
And I think I just read that Chadwick Boseman, the actor, the Black Panther, died without a will. So I don't know. It's very common. And
you know what?
There's all these solutions now. There's a lot of online wills where if you have a fairly simple situation, you can get a will done very quickly online.
I hate to hear about that. And because we see it too in real estate where some people are left with some property in the family, but then they have to sell the properties because there's no will and nothing's set up properly. They don't have the money to pay for the tax at the deemed disposition of these properties. It turns into like this just disaster where if there was some basic thing set up, maybe a life insurance policy here and there, and just like a few basic things, it'd been like, oh my gosh, you would have been so set up. But again, we don't talk about these things. Some of the books I read early on, and I have a few more questions I want to sneak in for you, were about living a balanced life. Like I remember reading about books, and then I remember reading about books on like productivity and like setting up your day properly and being a perfectly balanced life. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I can't do
Getting
this.
things done.
Getting
that was the book on that.
David,
I forget the guy's name now. Getting Things Done. It's like the original.
Yeah, that's right. With all the colored folders and stuff, you had to sort all this stuff. I remember that book. Yeah. And I just remember thinking, until I get my finances straight, I can't seem to have a balanced life because so much of my life is like I have to pay the car and I have to pay rent or this mortgage that I really need to dedicate. And it sounds kind of, some people don't like hearing this, but I'm like, you really have to dedicate some part of your life to setting up your finances, because if you don't, and let's say health and fitness are important to you, you're never going to be able to get to the yoga class because you're always going to be freaking about money, and you're never going to have enough money to have the time to have some freedom to go to yoga when you want to go to yoga. So I'm like, even if money's not your thing, spend some time setting it up, just because then the rest of your life is going to be great.
That's such good advice, because I think people think they can get away with not putting any time into their finances because money's not their thing, or I'm bad with numbers, or I'm bad with money, or I just glaze. You can't afford to do that. No. It's like your health. You can't afford to ignore the signs that your body's telling you if something's wrong or whatever. You don't have to be a doctor, but you have to be the person that's like paying attention. And it's the same with your money. So you can set it up, but I argue that you also have to kind of maintain it. You have to put time in, whether it's every week or every month. So I agree, like get those systems in place. And then some of it is a bit of a set it and forget it. Like you can do that to some degree. But I find there's always things to review and to be on top of, and periodically to look at, like subscriptions right now. Do I have like way too many subscriptions?
We all do. Let's face it.
Sense? Yeah. Right. And I put a lot of time into my personal finances. Maybe again, I'm comfortable with it. Like, I love a good.
You can tell you love it.
Yeah. Like it's just something I feel very comfortable. And my kids always saw that I was conscientious, that I was doing that kind of stuff. But even, parents who aren't accountants, I've heard stories where, the one thing they remember is their mom doing their budgeting on a spreadsheet or even on a piece of paper, and just setting that example, because that's one of the other strategies. We talked about values. I briefly mentioned teachable moments, but being a good financial role model for your kids, or trying to be the best you can by getting your own financial house in order, is so important.
Mm-hmm. And you're teaching your kids with just knowing you really briefly here, like the hard work you're doing, putting time into a book, updating a book, being here, sharing this message. They're learning from you in all these other wonderful ways.
I like to think so.
Yeah, for sure. And going back to my parents, as much as I said they didn't teach us much about money, is I learned hard work just from watching them. Work ethic, hard work. Our mom not having any money for Christmas presents, and 1 year her getting an extra job, and just
all those
you
stories.
Learn. Yeah, you just learn through just their actions. Are you working with clients right now as an accountant?
No, I don't.
Okay, I was going to say you'd be so great, because people would love sitting down with you and talking about their situation and getting your opinion on that. So you're not doing that now.
No,
okay.
I'm like not a real accountant anymore, I like to say.
Yeah. You talk the big game. I'm an accountant. Now,
I am still like, certified, like I pay my dues, and you never forget what a debit or credit is.
Yeah.
But no, I just do this. I speak and do the book, and work with financial institutions. Those are really my clients, to create content that is engaging and resonates with their clients.
Yeah, awesome. So, well, you are a great representative of all this. So thank you for the book. And then, where's the best? Is it the URL, the website? How do you want people to find you?
Yeah, there's a URL for the book, which is thewisestinvestment.com. On that website, you will get the financial role model self-assessment that we talked about briefly. And then my other website is my name, robintaub.com. It's TAUB. And that's the one with the values validator. And it has just more about speaking appearances. It has my blog, all that stuff.
Awesome. I mean, thank you for doing this. Is there anything I missed that I should have been asking you?
No, it was very thorough. Yeah, okay. Yeah, we got it all.
I feel like I let you off easy. We're just meeting each other. Next time I can put you on the hot seat. I feel
all right.
Yeah, but thank you, Robin. This is amazing. Thank you for the book. Amazon.ca also.
Yes.
Links off your website,
Links off my website, but you can get it on Amazon. It's as a physical book as well as an ebook.
Yeah, cool. Thank you so much, Robin.
My pleasure. Really Thank you.
Hey, thanks for tuning in. You can find every new episode of the Your Life, Your Terms show on all the major streaming platforms. So Spotify, iTunes, Google Play. And if you'd like to get free copies of some of the books that we've put together, like these right here, or some of the reports that we've put together, like these right here, you can find all of those at www.rockstarinnercircle.com. That's www.rockstarinnercircle.com. That's it for now. Until next time, your life, your terms.